Is Keiko Hara?
I
Is
cannot
Keiko Hara still on?
I don't see Keiko anymore, unfortunately. Maybe
Oh,
I hope she just went out for a break.
Oh,
I texted her to try to get on Zoom. She was on it earlier. So
yeah.
Good, good.
Let's see. Andrew has a question. I see your hand is up. Oh, you got to unmute though.
Working on it's late here. I'm working on unmuting. More of a comment. I was at the second of the workshops along with, I think, Mary, who's also present at the second workshop in Walla Walla, Washington.
Oh,
And Kitamura Sensei. And I must say it was one of the best workshops I've ever been at for how well organized it was in terms of spaces for students and materials and time with teachers and everything. It was a great experience, and I really, really recommend if you have a chance to study with Kitamura Sensei to take advantage of it next year when he comes back. And the presentation is wonderful. The tea room is wonderful. Walla Walla was very, very special. And I really liked their presentation and how they described the history and their hopes for the future. That said, I want to compliment the women who presented the following, the after presentation. Julianne, Lari, and Kazuko Goto. Very well presented, and I'm leery about the introduction of digital methods into printmaking. But you did it in such a gentle way that I feel less threatened. I very much appreciate the playfulness with which you approached using it as a puzzle to sort of mix and match and allow you to experiment. And I think the results are wonderful. And I think that the ability to allow people who have difficulty with the technique, as well as a goal at encouraging new people to try, is wonderful. And thank you for presenting your work.
Thank you so much. We definitely approached the introduction of digital media as a question as well, not necessarily a foregone conclusion that it would be good or correct or appropriate even. We really had a lot of open-ended questions about it. And by approaching it in such a maybe open-ended way and non-judgmental way, and with a playful approach that also allowed for a lot of hand carving, I feel like we learned a lot. I'll say that. And we made a lot of mistakes and made a lot of bad examples as well, but also a few good ones.
We're seeing just the good ones, right?
Yeah, there's pile.
Yeah, there's a pile.
Yeah, the pile. It's a very large reject pile in the corner, which is not in iShop right now.
Do you all three work at the same university? You're all in North Texas. Let's see.
Lari and I teach there, and Julianne was former student of us, and she graduated, but we kind of kept in touch. For this project, we thought to bring in like a different generation and view will be nice to work together.
Yeah, we felt like many collaborative teams that we all had different strengths to share with one another, and that we could grow by working with each other in that way. And so we wanted a group that was that definitely values the way we all work together, but also had a lot that we could share with one another and learn from. And so each of us really had a overlapping but different role. Is that a fair way to describe it? Yeah, so we were very lucky that it happened. And then it was especially important during the pandemic, because I think like so many things that happened during the pandemic, it probably could have pulled some groups apart, but because our underlying values were still very consistent with one another, it allowed us to continue working with each other productively at that time. Just in a different way than what we'd anticipated. But didn't everybody?
Yes, yes, everybody making it up as you go along. Did any of you study in Japan?
Actually, I did Mokando workshop with Damina-san 3 years ago or 4. Pat was in the same group, and also Kyoko-san in Japan. And I have been doing Mokanga, but mainly on my own. So although I'm from Japan, I'm from Kyoto, I was not really, I guess I didn't know much about Mokanga, and during graduate school, I started doing Mokanga because it's kind of fits to my personality that I like my own thing. So I kind of like my own space and own pace. So it fits me. So I did mainly on my own for years, like 15 years. Then I finally went to take workshop in Kyoto at Kitamura-san's studio. And I realized lots of things that, I struggled to find out on those 15 years could be answered in, 1 second. But it was a great experience for me. And I never really had formal training on Mokanga. So I did pretty much on my own for those years.
That sort of parallels. Remember,
in a way, I think it was good for me because I'm sorry.
oh, I was going to say that parallels Yunmi Nam's experience. Did you hear her speak about growing up in Korea? You having some technical difficulties? She grew up in Korea, and it wasn't until she went to graduate school in RISD in Rhode Island in the US, where she started to look more seriously at Chinese, the books, the 10 Bamboo Studio books from China, and realized that they were Japanese woodcut. And only then did she decide she wanted to learn more about it, when she was out of Asia and in the US. Oh, she's right there. But I think generally, when you live where you are, it makes you reflect on where you came from. I mean, for me, it certainly did too.
April, I think there are a couple of questions from Maria Spot.
Mary?
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment because I was with Andrew at one of the workshops, and I've actually been lucky enough to go to all 4 of the workshops in Walla Walla. And they're all different experiences and really well worth it. And as people know about it, it's harder and harder to get in probably. But okay. And the facilities, you do have your own space, but you're around people and you're working together. It's really a very good experience. Plus, Walla Walla is a nice place to go. And then in addition, with regards to the women talking about Texas, I also work.
Keiko is here now. Good.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry, I have to go back to lunch.
Hello, Kate.
For lunch.
It's nice you're back. We were actually talking about, Mary was actually talking about her experience in Walla Walla. So it's nice to have you back.
Oh, it was so wonderful to hear and see you, Mary.
The other thing I'd like to add, that's fine. The other thing I'd like to add is having worked at, I worked with Helen Frederick at Pyramid Atlantic Studio in DC as their paper maker. And, Helen started Pyramid, well, now 40 years ago. There was just the celebration of 40 years. From that standpoint of students getting out of school and not having the equipment or the space. And that was the whole basis for Pyramid Atlantic even starting. And when I was there, the other real advantage to something like that is, speaking of collaboration, which we've talked about with other papers that are, that is a constant learning practice. But if you get out of school and you don't have space or materials, you know, I think it's really brilliant that they went and looked at this whole program with that attitude, because you don't always have something like a Pyramid Atlantic or a community center where you can continue doing work. And, you know, Mokahanga just is pretty much self-contained. And it's much better to be around people because of that constant learning, but you can at least continue your practice. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah, I think
Pat.
Patty.
Yeah, I really enjoyed both presentations. They were great. I have a question for the Texas group. Hi, Kazuko. And one is, did you have a technician or someone helping you with the laser print carver, or did you have some training on it? And the other thing was, what was one thing you learned that surprised you about that, about working with the laser printer? The laser carver.
Yeah, those are really great questions. I had actually been working with laser cutters for many years, and it was one of the contributions that I could bring to this group, since I am always a long admirer of Mokuhanga, but have not practiced it as much. So I wanted to be around people who were practicing it. So we did, I'm hoping it's still going. Can everyone still hear us?
Yeah. You can actually.
Okay, very good.
Fine.
So we produced some of the blocks at our institution, but the experience actually led me to accelerate my goal of getting my own laser cutter and setting up my own studio, because during the pandemic, of course, access to many things was limited. So it was something that I had already been planning and working towards, but the experience of not being able to work on this project for a little while made me just get my own. So we actually did part of the project starting at our university, and then the rest of it using 100% my home studio resources for the laser cutting. We probably all learned different things from the experience, or it seemed like there were many surprises along the way. One of the things that I learned is sort of part of the technical laser cutting crew. I had so many different ways that I've cut wood and cut other materials using the laser cutter. It's one of the things that I'm very fond of sort of learning and playing with, in addition to a printmaking practice. I actually really enjoy working with CNC technology in general as a complement or expansion of a traditional printmaking practice. But one of the things that I learned through the experience was that it needed to be cut differently to work well with Mokuhanga. That was really what our whole project was about, was figuring out what sort of changes and adaptations I needed to make in order to make good blocks that could be printed in Mokuhanga. I'd already figured out how to make them so that they could print based inks well. Mokuhanga was quite different. So it really was a true learning experience for me, where, you know, I'd make something, we would pass the blocks around, we would learn from them. We actually have this really ridiculously complicated Google Drive file where we would take, it's my fault, I made it that way. But, you know, I'd be like, we have to document what the settings were for each block, you know, what settings I used digitally and what settings I used on the laser cutter, what laser cutter was even used, because over that period of time, I think I used a total of 3 or 4 at different institutions in different places. And then we had to keep notes on how we were printing them and what sort of effect all of those factors had together on the final outcome of the print, which really, of course, to us, at least to me, was the most important thing. It really didn't matter to me whether the woodblock was pretty or not. It was how would it print. And so a lot of things that I thought would work did not. We made a lot of changes along the way. It was also really wonderful to watch Ben Selby's presentation, because he approaches it in a way that complements what we're doing, but in a different way. When we started, we decided to limit ourselves somewhat by focusing on flat shapes. I decided that we would at least begin our experiments by getting gradations of tone through the ink and through the watercolor and through sumi inks, and mostly just so we weren't just guessing and all over the place. And we found that there were so many rabbit holes, so many questions that needed to be answered, that we kind of just ended up sticking with that for a long time. But Ben's presentation was really interesting in that he focused on halftones instead, as well as shapes. And he used a different laser system than the one that I used for most of our projects. So it's really neat to learn about all the different ways that this is manifesting itself right now in contemporary expression. I realize I just spoke way too much.
No, it was lovely.
Very interesting.
I think the comparison with Ben's demonstration was really good, and it actually uses cherry wood instead of Sheena. So also the results, probably with Sheena, you were nicely mentioning all the part you have to remove because there was a little bit of spotting. I'm not sure it did have the problem with the cherry, but it's not here. We can ask it. It's really lovely presentation. I really enjoyed it. Yunmi, you have a question.
I just have a comment. I just thought it was really great to, hi guys. It was really great to hear what students thought. You know, you kind of showed student work and just the kind of feedback you got from students using the laser cutter and making the print, but then also some students preferred hand carved look. And that was really interesting to hear, because that's something that is just kind of starting now, I think, in a lot of the institutions, with all of us getting laser cutters and everybody trying different things. And often like faculty are the ones that are kind of starting to use it and then implementing in the classes. And it's kind of in the early stages of just trial and error. So it was really interesting to see their works and just the comments that they provided for you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for talking with us too while we were doing our investigation. We reflected often on our conversations about printmaking curricula and how Moguhanga fits into that in very important ways.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, we got Benno.
Hello, Lari, Juliana, and Kazuko. I want to thank you for your great paper. It's very nice. I'm happy to see your paper about laser cut, but I think it's a very interesting tool to use. And when I use it since 2013 for my work, I have a little shame to talk about these tools. And now I'm very happy to see other person in the community and use this tool to create a new print, and it's very nice. Thank you so much.
To balance the two, use both, not one or the other.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that comment. I understand, I feel like I understand where you're coming from with that. I remember when I first started kind of just playing around at first with CNC technology, actually somebody in our studio in my academic environment said, well, I see why you're going to do that. That'll make things a lot faster. And I kind of laughed at them because it really doesn't, for me, it wasn't making anything faster at all. And it wasn't cheating. It was just another tool for me.
It's different.
So anyway, I feel like I understand the different perspectives that people have on it.
Yeah, and also students, I'm not really good with laser cutter, or I don't know much about it. And so I don't teach that part, but students sometimes wants to do it. And usually when they approach to me that they want to do it is because they feel like they can go faster, and they end up not most of the time. And that's kind of interesting, and they do learn from it, and I think it's very kind of important to see that they realize it's not easy way to do it, and it's the decision has to be made not based on the easy or hard, but like if you really need to do it for your work. So I think I guess it's really good.
And with this tool, you can find another way for the print. You can. It's difficult to explain with my bad English. It's not only keep time to carve, but you can go in different way. So you understand what I say? A different artistic way. Or... It's not necessary. It's not only.
But more than that.
It's not only keep time.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that was one thing that we didn't end up even acknowledging all of the artists who use technology or who are aware of technology and experimenting with it. We didn't end up naming them in our presentation, but just picked a few people who I would agree, like you, explained that they were using it or choosing not to use it for very specific reasons. And we thought it was interesting, I think, all along that it didn't always have anything to do with speed. A lot of times it was the concept or the content of the artwork that made the use of laser cutters appropriate or not appropriate. So that was fulfilling to me to have those dialogues with other artists about that, about when it can be meaningful.
Thank you very much for your paper. It's very nice.
It was very nice. Andrew.
I was going to say that I would think that one of the issues that seems to be coming up with using a laser cutter to cut is that because you're getting vertical cuts, it's not really as easy to print water-based because of the collection of nori and pigment. But if you wanted to mix oil-based ink with watercolor ink, it'd be a perfect opportunity to use laser to allow you to use oil-based ink, because you could bypass the problem of using nori and water-based pigments. So if you wanted to incorporate a difficult to carve block, especially key block, it would make sense to use a laser cutter with vertical edges and then ink it with a brayer and print it oil-based over, for example, water-based color plates. So just raises a different set of possibilities.
I'm actually, may I ask you and me, because I remember in Honolulu, you had a lovely print with a postcard, and you told me mostly was laser cut. And I remember that was really fine line. I mean, did you had some problem printing that concerning what Andrew was talking about, the edges, and did you had to adjust your way of printing? Do you want to share your opinion about this?
For that project that they showed, I just use laser cutter for texts that were on the postcard. And they also talked about it a little bit about, and I'm not as knowledgeable. We have a technician at our university. Oh, someone's phone's ringing.
Oh.
We have a technician at our university that helps me with the laser cutter, and there are some issues, I think, for sure. And I've been primarily using it for more line-based work, like text primarily, and some of the texts are so tiny and small, it almost was like halftone in some ways, how close they were. So it's just a matter of really trying to get things off, and because it's line work, I think also I was printing, except for one layer where I was kind of doing a little, there's a back of the postcard where I had text that is imitation of handwritten.
I remember that. Yeah, that was what
pen
came to mind.
Yeah, so then I would ink that up, but then use a little brush to kind of dab a little darker blue here and there to kind of imitate that kind of pause and pooling of ink that happens when you use fountain pen. But other than that, I think just like any kind of fine line work, I didn't use nori. I try to kind of print it as I guess dry as possible, even though it's wet, but on the drier side, so it doesn't have that accumulation. But I forgot to, I was about to say, they also experimented with kind of creating a little slope, which does help a little bit. But there's a setting, and I'm not that knowledgeable, but there's a setting in our university's laser printer where you can create the slope and you can kind of control the angle.
No, that would solve all the printing problems.
Well, it's
It
still
doesn't
a
solve
rough
all the
surface,
problem.
though.
It solves a little bit. It solves a little bit more that it doesn't. It keeps it a little bit stronger, I think, when you have a fine line. But the problem is you have to really play around with the laser cutter, like the strength and the speed, because sometimes that also causes two lines that are too close together to just become one line. So you do have to kind of play around a little bit with it. And it's not perfect, but I think that gives a little bit more of a strength and a little bit more option when you're using laser cutter.
Yeah, I think there is probably, we tend to think that laser cutter resolve problems, but actually it makes more problems than, so it's so interesting to listen to your presentation and how you try to solve all these, all the problems and all the stuff. I'm still really worried for my old age, so all this is really interesting to me.
And I guess one thing that I would add to that is I have taught a workshop at Anderson. I have taught Mukuhanga at Anderson Ranch, and they have the laser cut facility, which also Lari teaches woodblock, oil-based woodblock, I believe they're using laser cutter. And one of the thing I think is really great about that is for people that are not able to carve physically, it's a really great option for them to be able to make an image using laser cutter and print. So that's a really great option, I think. It's not perfect. It doesn't do what hand carving does, but it allows possibilities.
They also have a CNC router there, I believe.
Yeah.
Did you experiment with that at all?
No, I just did laser cutter with the Mukuhanga class or workshop.
Yeah, Michael Ion was saying the CNC gives you more control, but it requires a lot of technical knowledge and experimentation, I guess.
So a CNC, what is really advantageous about it, I would agree with Mike. It was actually one of the things that we talked about during our collaboration. Towards the end of it, I ended up buying a CNC router so I could continue experimenting with it, because with a CNC router, you can use a tapered bit, or you can use a bit that has a curve to it to carve out different parts of your block. And it doesn't leave the pitch that a laser cutter leaves, but a laser cutter, on the other hand, can get exquisite fine details that a CNC router can sometimes blow out, depending on the wood and depending on a lot of factors. But Yumi is correct that with epilogue laser cutters, there is a unique feature. It's a little bit of a programming that they put in there that is called the stamp feature. And the stamp feature, you can actually control the taper of an edge that you're burning into a wood block, or you can just burn straight down, which is what most laser cutters do, like the Thunders and the Bosses. If I understand it correctly, they do not have a stamp feature. So that's why epilogue is so wonderful that way. However, that stamp slope is still created by the vertical firing of a laser beam. So one of the very technical problems that we found is that the wood becomes, even when it's sloped, as you would be hand carving it, it would still be more porous than what we wanted. So there were still adjustments that we had to make when learning how to use it. Yeah, it's a very detailed, finessed thing, I guess.
Is that another question from Faith?
I had a couple of things I wanted to touch on, if it's okay. One is for Keiko, and that was one of my regrets about the 2017 conference, was that I was at the satellite program at Donkey Mill and I got sick and I missed your workshops. And ever since then, I wanted to come up and do one at Walla Walla, but then the idea of that Shoichi will be there too is pretty amazing. And I think just having the pandemic and then just being able to be together, even with Zoom, it just makes me so hungry to get back in person with people. I was also signed up for Karen Kunk's workshop at Anderson Ranch 2 years ago in the summer, and of course then the pandemic. So still really hoping that one day I can do that. But one thing I did find during the pandemic, I had bought one of Rosalind's bed ends at the 2017 conference. And then I also bought a video that went along with it, which I never got around to watching, but during the pandemic, I did, and I learned so much. And I was thinking, oh man, if I had watched that, 3 years ago, how much greater my knowledge would be. So it's
There was a video from Rosalind?
I think so. Wasn't it, Rosalind? Did you do one that you sold at the conference?
I think there was a DVD with your Baron. I remember that.
Yeah, and it was fantastic. Yeah.
I produced a DVD just as a general educational tool and had
It
it
was
available at the
fabulous.
last conference. Thank you. Thank you.
It's fabulous. And I've also had thought that, in 2017, I was always just going to the demos. I wanted to watch the artists carve or Goto-san. At this time, the focus really has been on the presentations and the papers as well as some demos, but that the opportunity, I did end up staying most of the night last night, because it's not just that you can watch the video anytime, but getting to actually talk to the people.
Talk about it, yeah.
So rich and wonderful. And it's just been, it's been a great conference. So thank you, everybody.
Excellent.
The seat one after the others. Alex, Oleg.
Yes, I would like to ask maybe Yumi or maybe the laser cut team here about something that I think about using this kind of machines. And how do you feel about this kind of, or is it exist, or is it good or bad? I don't know. How do you employ this instrumental feeling to those machines that carve? Do you think this kind of feeling, like instrumental feeling about mechanical carving?
I think the part is very important is the impression. And the wood block you use is what you do with the block when you are printing. And you show in your paper with 3 blocks, we can obtain a lot of kind of print. And I think it's the same. It's what cutting with laser or chisel or another tool is what you are doing with the block when you're printing.
Yeah, of course, but yes, of course. But I was thinking about what do authors think about it? Because of course we can do everything we want. And I'm not suggesting that this instrumental approach to the tool is bad or something. It could be useful, but I would like to hear what the authors think, what students think about this kind of, because you know carving and you know this CNC or laser. What do you think about these 2 kinds of words?
Maybe I can just talk about my work a little bit. I mean, they talked about it beautifully in their presentation. But the reason that I wouldn't say that's my medium, the technology of choice. I hand carve still most of the time. But the reason that I wanted to try that was because I'm interested in this mediated mark and how, painted mark and printed mark, how different kind of ways of mark translates information or image. So just the kind of relationship that I was interested in between how painted mark gets imitated by woodblock prints, by carvers carving the painted mark, and then the distribution of that woodblock printed image and the painters looking at the woodblock printed mark and painting, and also the photomechanically printing using lithographic process of that printed woodblock printed mark and re-representing it in photolitho. So all of those kind of translations of mark making is an element of what I'm really interested in. So naturally, I wanted to try to kind of explore what that means with the laser cutter. So I actually drew the postcard with my hand and hand drew all of the text with my hand and then scanned it and then laser cut that on the block and then printed it. I don't know, this might be completely meaningless, but the process somehow is important to me, that there is this multiple layers of translations of mark making through different hand or machine. So that's the reason that I kind of explore laser cutting in that particular, the print, because that print also had kind of this typewritten information about the Mendenhall Glacier, and then also fountain pen written, handwritten text. So that was also another kind of 2 element that coexisted in that same image.
Yeah, I really like this postcard, and kind of opened my eyes for your art, I think. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's not the way you decide to do it, it's the intentionality. I think what's impressive about that postcard is that Yunmi had a plan, and then she figured out the best way to achieve it with whatever tools are available, starting with the idea first.
Of course, I'm very fortunate because I work at a university that has that facility. So definitely I'm lucky to have access to that facility and a technician that's knowledgeable that can help me.
Mm-hmm. It's the planning that impresses me, thinking about the best way to approach it. And that is a lovely piece. And it's all mokuhanga. You didn't do oil base for the thin lines.
No, that's all mokuhanga. And Yeah, everything else is hand carved, just the texts are all laser carved. And
one thing is that you are able to create this kind of, I don't know, for me, kind of detached areas, because this is kind of, I don't know, skill or some kind of intelligence into this. I couldn't make it. I think maybe, I don't know, even if I had the CNC or something. So this is kind of, for me personally, I'm sorry, but personally it has kind of strange like feeling.
Makes me think of Shoichi Kitamura's knife sharpening. Very to the point.
Well, but I was also impressed by the fact that actually
Oh, who's speaking?
No, I was sorry, Larry. I didn't realize you were talking. You speak. You talk, please.
I'm sorry. I think there might be a little lag in the sound. One of the things that we found as we were talking with students and working with students, and just throughout the 2 years of our project, was that laser cutting could be a great entry point for some people who might not be able to do all of the carving as their initial introduction to moguhanga. And I think you mentioned this as well separately about some of the workshops at Anderson Ranch, for example, that it can be a great asset or tool in certain situations. And what I love about that is if you can find a way to meet people where they're at, then they'll want to learn more. They'll get excited about it and they'll be like, oh, that was so cool. But you know what? Now that I know how that works, now I really want to hand carve it because that looks really cool too. So sometimes if you can just, provide people with some different options, and one of those options will hook them in, then they can fall in love with moguhanga in the biggest sense, and they can find an approach that is good for them.
That's a funny description of teaching.
But it's so right.
Patty.
Also, it's also kind of waves to it, that there are kind of heights and downs with those fascination with the technology and the traditional, I don't know, not the traditional, but maybe tactical more approach. And recently my students started to make only stone lithography. I didn't ask them for this, and everybody is into stone lithography. And okay, so let's do stone lithography. But there was sometimes that they didn't want stone at all. So this is maybe kind of like wave forms.
Patty?
This was a super interesting collaboration, the three women together coming up with this process. And it just got me thinking about something, about the expansiveness of the medium and how there's something where it becomes almost like mokuhanga language that is using other forms to create that language. So, maybe it's the water-based printing that makes it the language. But I found that really interesting. Like, okay, when do you stop calling it mokuhanga? And that, or that maybe the labels aren't important, and that to just let the medium expand. And I'm finding it's informing other forms of my own work. I did some work in Illustrator with hundreds of layers. That was almost like a key block outline, which is how Illustrator set up, it's the outline with the fill. And I layered and layered and layered and layered. And this thing I could never, ever make in mokuhanga. Actually, I don't even think you could CNC router it or laser it. It is so many layers. So I printed it. There's a process in not too far from me, actually, oddly, because I'm very rural, where they use these heavily pigmented inks.
That's a famous place.
Cone Editions. Yeah, it's very famous, and it's maybe an hour. I'm rural and it's an hour away from me, and it's amazing what they're doing. I mean, people come from all over, but they make their own ink. And I brought a roll of awagami paper, and we printed these large format, it was like 40 by 80 sheets with all these hundreds of layers. I mean, it even took a full day. I did 5 prints. That's just the printing. But when I exhibited them, people were looking at them and just saying, they don't look like digital prints. It's like, what is this? Which is, a response that I really love. What is this? And I found that it was my knowledge of mokuhanga which created these images, and just doing it to like, in other words, it was a bit like mokuhanga language, and yet it was something that even with the laser cutter or something like this, you could not make this image. But it was, some of them were in gray, layers of gray, and this and that, thin lines, that. So anyway, I just wondered if that was some kind of thought that people were thinking about, that we're somehow getting this language that can be applied to other mediums.
I think it's about intentionality. If you have an idea, you figure out how to make it. But I think all of us are like really interested in mokuhanga, which is a starting place for for me to speak about anything, including the digital stuff. I don't know, anybody have any comments?
I think printmakers have always used tools. And somebody said the other day, think of a pencil and how complicated and high tech that object is. So
it really is.
We are using machines anyway, and we're always at the cutting edge. So I love this hybrid post-digital, digital native approach to making. It's just using another tool to make something unusual. There's a big trend of people combining inkjet prints or laser printed prints with mokuhanga in China. I don't know if anyone has Liu Jing's work. It's very interesting because he's printed the final block. A lot of the students from the workshop are printing these enormous prints, like, I don't know what it is in inches, but like 1 meter 20 by 80 centimeters, so a big sheet. And there'll be laser printed imagery with a final woodblock print on top, making this very incredible, alluring, captivating image that you're not sure how it was made because it's got the signifiers for analog and digital combined.
But isn't that similar to what Tetsuya Noda did?
Perhaps,
woodblock background, and then the I guess
lithography. Yeah, it's really, I think it's really captivating for us because we all speak we speak multiple print languages, but it's kind of really alluring to us because we want to know how it was made. But I think it also speaks a language of, like, the photographic language is really well rendered in digital media, and the language of light is so it's like sweeties in a sweet shop, you really want to consume it. And so we have this kind of lovely language that combines particularly well with the handmade and the hand touched. So
yeah, and could you type what was the artist Liu Jing? I just want to mention one other thing that crossed my mind, but also for accessibility, it seems like there could be potential there for the laser cut.
I think Marta has as we are having her hand raised for a couple of minutes now.
I think
Martha Brom, or
I think
maybe.
she's gone.
Well,
She
am I
said-
missing somebody?
She said goodbye a while ago.
Oh, Martha. Okay, so I'm gonna. Well, I'll see if I can put your.
I did want to say something about Julianne, Lari, and Kazuko. Or the point that I really like that you made is about accessibility and also making people successful, you know, to feel successful as artists, because I think that's equally important for children as well as adults. I teach adult just simple workshops, and I find that they're afraid to even pick up a pencil. They're afraid to draw. They're afraid to try a lot of things. And when I first started studying with Hiroki at Donkey Mill, I would find that it was usually some of the women would say, I can't carve. This hurts my wrist. I can't carve. So you're making it accessible and you're making people successful with it. And I think both of those things really further the art form. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that comes across.
Yeah.
Am I missing a raised hand?
Well, actually, I think Martha is here because I lowered her hand. So, and it's up again. Martha Brown, are you
here? Yes.
Okay.
The thing that I was wondering is, do people find a qualitative difference in the nature of the mark with the laser cut and the, say, Hanji toe cut? Because I know, for instance, if I make a line on the computer, that is a straight line beyond anything that I can make, even if I'm drawing with a graphite pencil along the edge of a ruler. Those are two visually discernible things. And does that difference show up if you're combining laser cut work and hand cut work?
I think
So
Lari wanted to reply to this, I think.
Yeah, I can, I think, begin to address that question, and I'm sure everyone will have a lot. Oh. I'm sorry, there might be an audio delay.
Yeah, we are
Martha
not
doesn't have
seeing.
her image on.
So, Martha, one of the things that we chose to do with our project is we started with drawings that were done by hand in Sume ink, and then we scanned them at a high resolution, and we we used those to create.
Oh, we lost.
I think
them. Lari, unfortunately, there is some problem with the audio, actually, with the video as well.
Well, I think Martha doesn't not have her image on.
No, it was Lari was answering Martha's question, but the audio is coming and going. I don't see.
Oh, here she is, here.
Anymore.
There she is. Okay. And then Andrew next.
Andrew, did you have a question for Lari, or do you want to, because there are.
I had a comment and not a question, but if they're back, they should probably answer the question. I see under Kazuko Goto, they're back, it looks like.
Oh, hey.
But, oh yeah, great. You're using.
We're back with mine.
Great. Welcome back. Good, good.
They're muted though, they're still quiet.
Yeah, but I think they're settling themselves. Do you want me to unmute yourself?
Yeah, sorry.
Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry,
But we
one of
might-
our computers died.
We might have missed some of that.
Oh, mhm.
The one question we were answering, I guess, is the nature of hand-drawn marks versus illustrator marks. And with a laser cutter, you can use any type of mark that you want, really. You can make a perfect geometric mark within software. Or what we did is we started with drawings that were made in Sume ink on paper, and then we scanned them. And that's what we used to create the laser cut blocks. So it is true that I can't draw a line as straight as Illustrator can, but we didn't let that change the nature of the blocks that we made.
Going out. I was about to get ready. This finishes in 10 minutes. About to get ready to garden for an hour.
Please do continue.
Sorry, I'm making noise.
So Martha, do you have another question for you still? Oh, okay. And so Andrew,
Andrew was going to make a comment a while ago.
Yeah, my comment was sort of about the intention of your goal of what you're trying to do with your marks. And I think that I often use text in my work. And one of the things I really like about mokuhanga is its ability to reproduce, calligraphy or handwriting. And so I can reproduce my handwriting really, really well with a hangito in a way that is different than if I scanned it in and tried to create a polymer plate and then print it with oil-based ink. Conversely, if I use text stolen from a font from the computer, my inability to carve it precisely in cherry means that when I carve it by hand, you can tell that it was carved by hand, even though it looks like the text I copied. So I'm often playing with
that's interesting.
sort of mix between being able to pretty accurately copy my handwriting, either script or printed, and my inability to really carve perfectly fonts. And so a lot of times I include both of those things in my prints because I don't want it to look like I'm just copying a typewriter. I wanted to see that it was me that carved it versus when I wanted to look like my handwriting, I can with carved text. So I love mokuhanga for both of those things, my ability to copy my own writing and then interpret printed text for my own purposes.
Well, mokuhanga does give you incredible ability to be accurate with that hangito knife. I mean, you can do a lot of detail.
The limit tends to be scale. So a lot of times if I want it to be really small, it pushes the boundary of what I can actually physically carve compared to what a skilled carver in the late 1800s could carve.
Mm-hmm.
Any more questions or comments?
Everybody's tired now, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
I think for me, I would say.
Oh, Karen?
No, I was just going to say, I think for me, I love carving so much that I think it would be taking away something very precious by letting a machine do what I love doing. And the difficulties are, for carving something very small, then that's the problems that I engage with when I'm, making a wood block. So those are the problems that I can deal with or reevaluate my design. I'm not to say that laser cutting isn't a wonderful thing and a great resource for lots of people, but I just don't. For me, I love the journey of the process, and I think it takes that away from me.
Well, I think especially at the current moment, it's one more thing that'll push you to spending more time on the computer. Which in the age of COVID, we really don't want. Have enough computer
and
time.
My printer has just died tonight, so if I had a laser cutter, that would be, I'd spend most of my time trying to work out why it's not working.
Yeah, dealing with technical issues and looking at the computer, where you could pull up your knife, you can do quite a lot.
Exactly that. And the freeing, the way of using the hangito, it's so freeing. It's like
holding it in the fist. Yeah.
It's just drawing. It's just
once you get used to that, it's so great.
And I've just got a whole new, I gifted myself a whole new set of tools, and they are just wonderful.
Oh, where did you get them from?
I got them from Woodlike.
Uh-huh.
And they're beautiful.
Woodlike Matsumura-san in Tokyo.
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought I'd put that in.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the computer and by digital imaging, and I'm just burned out at this point. I don't want any more computer than I absolutely have to, because I do spend a lot of time on the computer.
Well, we surely did in the last couple of days, but
in general, I do. I mean, the pandemic has just pushed us all into virtual space. I see Florence just came back. How you doing, Florence?
Good. I just had Michael Shannon and his daughter pick up their benefit work. And I'm down at Kentler Gallery, so I'm in and out. And the one time I answered the door today without my mask, it was actually the New York health inspector.
Oh, God.
But I don't think he didn't give me a ticket. It's ridiculous. But this is
so you're gallery sitting today by yourself?
Yeah, I'm at the front desk. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
So you enjoyed the conference?
Yes, I missed a lot of the videos because of things, but I'll go back.
Yeah, we can catch up on a lot of that.
I tried to stay up last night. I heard Michael sneeze. He woke me up. But,
yeah, I stayed up as far as Kitamura's sharpening demonstration. And then I just had to sign off after, I don't know, 15 hours of watching videos. And it is very exciting to see all these people that I was hoping to see in person.
Indeed.
Is there kind of an official ending, or
we're just kind of trailing off now, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna stop the recording so we can, be a little bit more.
Yeah, this is our